Take a look. Same expert advisor, same period, same parameters, two completely different back tests. That's why, for me, Dukascopy's perfect ticks sometimes are just plain useless. Today, we're going to do a real experiment. I'm downloading 10 years of Dukascopy historical data on the US 100, so on the NASDAQ, from Quant Data Manager. I import this data into MetaTrader, and I run one of my expert advisors with Dukascopy data and with my broker's data, and we'll see what the difference is. In the end, you'll see with your own eyes why relying on that data can lead you to make the wrong decisions instead of the right ones. Welcome everyone, I'm Andrea, your automated trader, and if you like what I do, leave a nice like. To the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos I'll be posting. So, this is Quant Data Manager. I have the paid version, but it does not cost much. If I remember correctly, I paid about $50 to $60 for a lifetime license, so I paid once and you have it forever. Once you're in the program, you need to download the ticks you need. So in our case, let's go look for them. The US 100 ticks from the NASDAQ for 10 years. How do you do that? So the first thing we need to do is add the Dukascopy data. So let's go here. Dukascopy data at the top, add new Dukascopy data symbol. And let's look for our NASDAQ. Let's see where it is. Okay, right here, US Tech, this is the one. Then let's go to the broker profile section. For now, let's leave everything as I have it set up. That's all we need. Next, we select the tick data option to download all the ticks. Let's move on. We just need to check everything here and then we can continue. Once we have added it to our list, we navigate over here like this and click to select it. After that step, we proceed to download the information by clicking Download Data for Existing Symbol. Next, we go here and choose how much historical data we want to download. For this demonstration, I am choosing a short time period just to show you how the process works. So let's set the date to 2025 from September 25th up to today. That way, it goes quickly. There isn't much data to download. If you have the paid version, the data downloads very quickly. But if you're using the free version, you can still download the data. But it takes much longer, so here we leave everything as it is and start the download. You see the download has started, and here we have the progress bar moving forward. In our download, so the download is complete, the data has been downloaded. So the next thing we need to do is synchronize the data with the time we use on our broker's server. In my case, I have GMT +2. So I go to Tools, Clone to Time Zone, select the data, and do Clone to Time Zone. So here we choose the type of file with the data, and we set which time zone we want to have. So in this spot, it's already set to UTC +2, which is the one we use on the server I use. If you have other time zones, choose the one you're interested in. Remove weekends. I don't enable it because I don't want to remove weekends from the data. I want the gap to remain as usual. Let's proceed. Okay, the job is done. Now we have our data with the time zone of our server, which is this one here with UTC +2. The previous ones were just UTC, so they weren't suitable because all the times were off. Obviously, the data then doesn't work correctly. Now, the last step we need to do is export the data and import it into MetaTrader. How do we do that? So let's select our data, which is this one. Let's go to Export. Export to MT5. Here we select the period of the data we want to export. In this case, we took it from September. We export everything, choose whether we want the ticks or just the minute. So I want all the ticks. Obviously here I choose a folder where I'm going to export the file. The file I'm going to export is a CSV file, which is what I'll need in MetaTrader to be able to import the data. So I export it and save it somewhere on my computer. You just have to click on Export and it will export it. Now I've already done this step. I have a file with 10 years of data that we're now going to import into MetaTrader right away. So here we are in MetaTrader. How do you add a new symbol with the data we've downloaded? Let's go to the Market Watch in MetaTrader, right-click, select Symbols, Create Symbol, Custom. Here we copy all the information from the symbol we already have from our broker. In my case, it's the US 100, this one here, and we click OK. Obviously, we need to give it a different name, otherwise they'll have the same name and we won't be able to tell them apart. Let's call it US 100C, which stands for custom. Let's see. Okay, and we've created our symbol, a new one. We need to activate this icon by double-clicking it so that it's visible in Market Watch. And it will be under Custom. If you use, for example, the tester, you'll find it here under Custom. There's Indices, and inside there's our US 100C. Now we need to import all the ticks that we downloaded, so what do? We go to Tick and select the famous CSV that we downloaded earlier. So the one we saved, we click Browse and go get our file. I already have it here, this US 100. I had also downloaded the DAX data. Anyway, for now, let's try the US 100 one. It's selected and we click OK. This is something that takes quite a bit of time, especially if you have a lot of data. So in my case, it started now. 0.1%. It's going to take quite a while because it's 10 years of data, and it will create the symbol new. You see, now it's at 1%, 1.2%. It'll take about half an hour and will load all the data. If you have a particularly powerful computer, the time required will probably be shorter. In my case, it's just a regular computer, so I need to be patient and wait for all the data to load. All right, here we are. We've downloaded all the data, we've imported them, and now the data are imported into our MetaTrader. What's the next step? Let's take a look visually, maybe on the H1 time frame, to see what changes between this data and the data we had from our broker. So now let's open a chart with our broker's US 100. Here it is. So we open a chart window and the US 100 that we downloaded from Dukascopy, which is usually always at the bottom. So let's open this one too, put them side by side and look at the most recent data. Of course, the data I downloaded doesn't go all the way up to the present moment. It's missing a few hours, but that's not important. Let's already take a visual look at what's different. Here we can see there was this drop, roughly. The candles look the same. Then there's this upward candle, another one going up. And then there's a candle here with a fairly large body. Whereas here, in the Dukascopy data, that body isn't there. The candle is already different. So that means the prices move differently. We can see that the times are the same, obviously, right? Because as I showed you, we've aligned the data. So for example, this one is at 4 p.m., the first big candle that drops. Let's go over here and see that it's also 4 p.m. here. So everything is perfectly aligned. So what do we do now? Let's try running one of my experts. First on my broker's data and then on Dukascopy's data. That way we'll see if they change a little, a lot, if there are differences or what happens. Let's give it a try. So here we are in our tester. Let's choose this bot for the opening of the American market, which works specifically on the US 100. Let's start by testing it over a 1-year period, fast or HLC, and see what happens. The first one we're using is our broker's US 100. Let's run the test and see if it works here. We see that we have an equity curve, nice, ugly, but we have an equity curve with this trend. Now let's use the US 100 from Dukascopy, so the one with the C. Let's run the test again with the same parameters. We won't change anything. Let's see what changes. Okay, we can already see that the test doesn't work. There's something wrong with this data. What's the problem here? The problem is that this expert closes the position at 11:30 p.m. Why? Because my broker's trading hours go until midnight and then it closes for an hour from midnight to 1 o'clock. Whereas Dukascopy, as you can see here, makes the last candle at 11 p.m. At 11 p.m. it closes, while then it also reopens at 1 in the morning. What does this mean? It means we already need to modify our expert because Dukascopy's data isn't like that of our broker. But we're trading on our broker. So already here we have a difference because I closed the position an hour earlier compared to what I'm actually using on the broker. And this will impact our expert. So we're already running a test that isn't the same as what actually happens in reality because we close an hour early. Sometimes this will work in our favor and other times it will go against us because maybe the market is very strong. It's moving in our direction and we close the position too early. Let's go into the settings and change this. So we'll set the closing time to 10:50, maybe. Now let's run the test and see what happens. So as you can see, it's similar but different because the equity is still slightly different from before. Now let's go into detail and use all the ticks, not the HLC, which was just to check if the bots were working, and we've already found a difference anyway. So let's take our expert, put it on the US 100 as before, the one from the broker, and set it to every tick on real ticks, so that we can see what happens with the broker's data. Same period, same settings. Obviously, I'm going to change the closing time again because my strategy calls for closing at 11:30 p.m. as it was set initially. And I launched the expert. So the test is finished. Let's look at the equity here. We started and ended at about 10,000 euros. Let's also look at the data. Here are the data. Let's look at the profit, 0 minus 32. So we lost 32 euros and had a maximum drawdown of 20%, so about 20%. Let's run the same test again with Dukascopy's data. So first we need to set the closing time before 11 p.m. So let's set it to 10:50 p.m. to make sure we don't close exactly at the market close. And then we change our data, so we switch to the custom ones and run the test. All right, here we are. The test is finished. Let's see. So first of all, here we lost about 1,000 euros. The equity curve, yes, it's quite similar, but it's not the same. Why is that? Because as we've also seen from the H1 candles, sometimes the data is different. And then we have the issue with closing since we close at 2 different times. Why is that for us? Our broker closes at midnight, while Dukascopy closes at 11 p.m. Let's take a detailed look at the data, see? Earlier we lost 30 euros, here we lost 945 euros. The drawdown has definitely increased because we went from 20% to 25%, so that's still a significant increase. The data quality is 100% because both our broker and Dukascopy had 100%, so tick quality. Good, but the results are different. So if your system works on a broker that doesn't educate, you end up using that data. In practice, it's just fluff, hot air. It's useless. So what can we do instead? With this data, we can certainly utilize all of this data as a broad and detailed general analysis, especially in the case of some specific systems that happen to work in a very specific and somewhat unique manner. For example, this is much like the system I showed to you in several of my previous videos, in which you would open a long position on the NASDAQ at 1 in the morning and close it at a certain time before the market opened. That's a system where ticks are practically irrelevant. So if you want to run a back test over a long period and maybe your broker doesn't provide you with the exact data, let's say they only give you 3 years of history and you want to run it on 12 years of history, in that case, you can download the data from Dukascopy, run your test, and you'll get roughly the same result. Especially if you don't operate during the closing hours where you know the data is different and you're not working with ticks. Because clearly, if I open a position at 1 in the morning and close it at 3 in the afternoon, it's obvious that in that case, everything is irrelevant. My data, and I have data that more or less works well enough to give me a general idea of how my expert performed. In the historical period, in cases like the one I showed you, where there's an expert that operates at market open based on a range formed on a 30-minute candle, the Dukascopy data isn't suitable because it's different from your broker's data. Today we did the comparison with one broker. Try doing it with yours as well, and you'll see that the results are different. I tried it on 3 or 4 different brokers, just to make sure it wasn't a problem specific to this one, but the result is always the same. We get results depending on the broker that are different from those of Dukascopy. So, to give you a concrete example, it's like if you want to learn how to ride a bicycle, you learn to ride a bike. And then at a certain point, you decide not to use the bike anymore, but to use a motorcycle instead. Obviously, a bicycle and a motorcycle are not the same. They both have 2 wheels, but they're different to ride. Obviously, I don't develop experts to win in a data lab. I develop them to survive in the real environment. That is the broker's environment where they will actually operate. So they have to work with real slippage, real spreads, and above all, with the real broker's data. If I don't do this, my experts won't survive. So, as a practical rule, if you want reliable tests, use your broker's data. Everything else is just extra. If you found this video helpful, send it to a friend on WhatsApp because that's how important information gets around.